Good morning, everybody. Welcome to DevOps Breakfast. It's your weekly podcast dedicated to digital innovation and, of course, DevOps. I'm your co-host, Gina Smith.
Michael Araneta.
Hello, Michael Araneta. How are you? How was your week?
It was a good weekend. It's another start of a good week, hopefully. We are going to talk a lot today about digital innovation, particularly from the energy industry.
Yeah, and from the point of view of AI, a little later we'll have a great guest, Shelley Kalms from Perth. After last week having trouble with the pronunciation of Melbourne.
Well, thanks we begin to understand that there are different pronunciations of places that,
that Americans
I think we just really have to learn.
Just bastardizing all these Australian names. Anyways, she's in Perth, and she is the Chief Digital Officer at Woodside Energy. And she has been, I guess she's been there a long time, 9 years, and has been leading this data transformation with culture and processes and tools. It's going to be really interesting.
Yes, and I think it would be very topical, particularly for me, because in my household, we're doing some energy saving activities done by the kids, obviously, but I think it also impacts how we actually appreciate the use of energy at home.
That's a good thing to do with your kids.
It is, and I think that some of the use cases for AI would lend to that, right? Especially for consumers that are beginning to really look at not only energy consumption, but just really all the sustainability issues and our contribution to the world, sort of.
Yeah, it goes a lot beyond just reduce, reuse, and recycle. That was like a little song we would always teach our kids. Yeah, so she's got use cases, and we'll talk to her about pretty stunning cost savings she's seen from getting the data from, instead of having to go out on the rig, as it were, these really rough conditions, bringing that data in-house and cleaning it and being able to act on it. It's pretty cool stuff. Let's see, anything in the news this week?
Well, I think one of the big things that we're really tracking would be the IPO of Snowflake, a cloud-based data warehouse, which I think presents a different proposition now. I think many of the enterprises were building a lot of their data lake strategy, and then suddenly you've got the rise of this Snowflake company, which is IPO'd, a very good performance.
What about a couple of weeks ago it IPO'd?
Yeah, it was.
I think on the NASDAQ, it's up 50% or something. Was it trading at? What did you say before we started?
First trade was at $245, and now it's, I think, at about a $329. So very good performance, which actually speaks of not only the change that they are introducing to enterprise data architectures, but also how this is going to be consumed by enterprises like Woodside, I suppose.
Yeah, so how are they going to be able, and what's it going to do to, I guess, ease the data integration and consumption?
Yeah,
across. This would have been interesting had we known about it to talk to Craig Rowlands about from the last show. He was the head of data at Medibank. In Melbourne.
And I think the companies would be looking at the ability to integrate data coming from third parties that are not necessarily part of the data source of the bank, internal data sources, but they're starting to look at alternative data that they can acquire, also consume for decisions they make for the enterprise.
Yeah, I'm going to put that on our list. Let's see if we can find some enterprises to comment on that for our next guest. That's interesting. And what about this AWS outage?
Yes, so that was a shock to many people last week. I think many of our customers, at least from Financial Insights, were looking at that with great interest, particularly because AWS seemed to have gotten a lot of interest in terms of moving towards cloud. But I think they've remediated that very well.
Yeah, they turned it around, I think, within hours. But you know what went down? The Roombas. the couldn't vacuum that day. Nobody was crying.
Yeah.
And also the Rokus, right? The TV streamers.
Yeah. And I think this is proof that any outage or a break in terms of services for this huge cloud services provider would have an impact to consumers and their households, whether it's Roombas or people who are trying to save energy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we always are talking about how, the COVID pandemic has really rushed along things. Like we talked about DevSecOps, and then last week it really is rushing along data ops. And it's really rushing along cloud security, right? And just cloud quality.
Yeah. The ability
Everybody's
of
relying on it.
That's right. And it's all gotten to regulators as well, because regulators are looking at stability, reliability of services offered to consumers. I speak for the banking industry. There are regulators that are publishing downtime and availability and all these metrics around that of the reliability of services offered to consumers.
Yeah, and we're going to see all this governance and stuff being put into place around that. You sent me that over the week, that the UK is establishing a digital markets unit that will set up such compliance. And if it's happening in the UK, we'll see it everywhere soon.
Yes,
right?
and
It's like
especially
the privacy
because
stuff out of Europe.
that's right. And the UK usually starts this entire race among regulators, government agencies to show that they get the consumers. But I think this watchdog will look at not only the use of data coming from the third parties, but also how consumers are informed about the use of his or her personal data.
Okay, so the initiative was just recently announced. The new unit is supposed to be up and running by April. And it's being set up in the model of the Competition and Markets Authority there.
Mm-hmm. Just making sure that all these digital firms that are getting too big also are performing up to standard and to a certain level of anti-competition type of principle. You
do banking. Are you ever, do you ever encounter people, or do you think yourself that, oh no, this is going to cause a boomerang effect where we're too regulated, because people are panicking because of
it's
is there danger of that?
It is always a balancing act for banks. I think, we can talk about, regulation in terms of what principles we need to follow, but ultimately regulation has proven, in fact, to be quite beneficial to financial services. I think the recent crisis, or perhaps the impending crisis, will be proof of that as well, in terms of how regulators have really forced quality of assets, but also the quality of the balance sheets of the banks themselves. And they will prove to be quite a good set of decisions to really focus on quality.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm running out of fingers to count all the things that the pandemic is changing fundamentally quickly. Yeah. And our next guest, Shelley Kalms of Woodside Energy. She is going to join us about their data integration efforts. And undoubtedly, the pandemic has sped those along too. And so that should be very interesting. And she should join us any second.
Yeah.
Shelley.
Shelley is here.
And Shelley Kalms joins us now. And there she is. Good morning, Shelley.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, good. Very good. Thank you. And thanks for joining us. We are talking AI today, and I've been doing so much research on you in the last couple of days. And wow, you really, as Chief Data Officer there at Woodside Energy, really turned things around over there, saved some money, gotten some cultural processes fixed.
Yes, looking at the reimagining the business processes is where we're really focusing, and that is all about transformation. And it looks at the culture with the technology in behind it as well.
Yeah, we are always talking about that, aren't we, Michael? Like, how the culture aspects first of DevSecOps and then of AI ops, and it seems like every ops we talk about has a big cultural thing to get around. Can you tell us?
Yeah, and I think the theme that we've struck at, especially for the series on AI, would be that you can invest a lot in AI, but if it does not really result in the use cases that have an impact, then a lot of these investments would have gone to waste. Earlier, Shelley, you were talking about 18 use cases for AI within Woodside Energy. Can you talk to us about how this has expanded and has become deeper in terms of its impact, their impact to the organization?
Yeah, I think it's looking at the AI, it's all about the scaling. And when we look at AI, I like to keep things nice and simple. The three components that go into AI are the data, algorithms, and the compute. And so what we've done throughout our organisation across all the different divisions that make up what Woodside is we've done work across the enterprise. So Woodside goes from exploration, developments, projects, operations to market. And so we've been playing across the entire enterprise in there. And effectively what we've been able to do with AI is an example in the drilling area. We've taken and using AI, what used to take people, 80% of their time was about collating and getting the information, and then 20% was analysing. We've been able to turn that around with the use of AI. And so bringing tools like that in for our people. And now what we're doing is we're bringing it all together to really build out what we call the Northern Star for Woodside. And that's about, when we're looking at it, it's at the autonomous operations. So when we talk about autonomous, we talk about Tesla has self-driving autonomous cars. And that's where we want to move to at Woodside, is really the autonomous self-driving operations across the enterprise, but with ultimately the human supervision being in there as well. So we're building it all together, and part of it is as you're going through the different enterprises, but then setting it up to scale. And that's what we're doing now.
This must be a huge, huge endeavor. I mean, you guys have been around since what, 1954, really a big energy giant. I mean, what's the first step here? You had to get pretty intense buy-in, right, from the C-suite. Otherwise, how could you make a project this vast go?
It's a really good question. Really, for us, we have a CEO who has always leaned in, and he's always seen the potential of what technology can help deliver, and a real focus on innovation. And that's been key. And when we've been working in the organisation, in the data science, what we did was we incubated it like a startup, and to really enable outside of the typical corporate. And that's where it started. And with that, a culture has grown as well. And so taking that culture back into the wider enterprise is where we're working at the moment. So infiltrating that area there. But really in the C-suite, we have a very, leaning in C-suite, and they can see the potential of what this can do and changing the way that we work.
Are you implementing AI ops too?
Yeah, so that's part of the ops transformation in that space there.
Yeah, this initiative of Future Labs, I think, is where it all started, right? We talk about sort of building your data science capabilities and then starting to identify use cases for AI as well. Can you talk to us about the process of the Future Labs initiative and how it has really expanded to be all-encompassing enterprise-wide?
So with that, when you're working together, when you're building out your products, the product owner is the business. And so that's been really key in starting up the squads, that you bring in the product owner, the business SME knowledge, and working with them in how you can transform it. And we've been doing that across the entire enterprise. So really going again from that exploration, developments, projects, operations to market. So in that space, getting more and more people involved in the products that we're building out. And when I say we, it's not just the data science, but it's with the business as well. So you're doing it with them, not to them. And that's really different.
How do you get the data analytics people to speak the same language as, say, I don't know, the operations people, the IT people, the business people? I mean, is there a big language gap, communications gap to fix there?
I think what's been really key is working in collaboration and bringing the ops personnel in with the technology personnel, and together they both learn, both parties learn as well. And it's all, we go back to when you're also doing the design research to what's the problem you're trying to solve, and bringing the people in there, and then you really start to get a real mix. So the operations people, who are the ones that are at the pointy end of the work front, they really bring in the context, and the developers are learning more, as an example, or the data scientists and the data. So where does the data come from? And so they're all in it together and start to really understand where the potential pinch points are and how they can alleviate that.
While meanwhile integrating all the IoT stuff on the drills and, you know, the equipment and these harsh conditions in the middle of the ocean. I know you guys do deep ocean drilling.
Yeah. And so with the IoT, we have sensors up there as well that are streaming in. And so data, really rich in data, and that's really key. And so we have a great history of data as well. And then we're bringing on more and more. We actually, as part of the, if you call it the Future Lab or we call it the lab, what we're doing in there is we're actually developing our own sensors as well as part of the trial out. So a theme that we always work to is, what is the problem you're trying to solve, or what is the opportunity? Because you can do a lot of fun stuff with technology and it doesn't go anywhere. So it's that, again, working with the business. And then when you've got that, it's the think big, prototype small, and if that's successful, scale fast. And that prototype small is really important because it allows you to manage risk. You might find that the product promised all this, or what you're trying to do promised, and you just can't do it at this point in time. So it allows you to, I don't call it fail, but it allows you to learn. And that's really important as well in that space. And you might park it and pick it up in another 6 to 12 months when potentially technology may have evolved a bit more as well in that space.
We've talked about that, right, Michael? Constant experimentation,
right.
Fail forward. Like, you know, people aren't afraid to take risks, and
I think to Shelley's point, I mean, you need to build an inventory of potential problems to solve. Shelley, has this inventory of problems to solve increased, decreased, assuming that you have gotten better through time and you have the ability now to identify which problems are worth solving from the get-go?
So we have more problems than what we can deal with, which say greater demand, which is fantastic, because then you prioritize and you're really getting after, I guess, the greater value in that space there as well. So, and then as more and more of the business comes along, you're getting asked more, could we do this? How can we do this? So really opening up, I guess, the art of the possible in that space there as well, and bringing the organization along again, which is, I can't emphasize that enough. So part of bringing the organization along is all about that culture.
Yeah, and I guess busting silos, right? I mean, you can't have everybody working separately, and we see that again and again too. I mean, how do you go about that? What silos do you bust first when you're trying to create a data operation?
The silos is, and we have, I guess, a corporation that's quite traditional in with the silos, but it's that really working in an agile way allows that collaboration across and breaks down the silos in effect. And so we're finding that really effective way of working, and we're quite practiced in it, but it's bringing in what I call the traditional part of the enterprise and bringing them along on that journey of learning. And once they do it, it's like, wow, you can see they actually see the real benefit of it. Because if you look, traditionally we are quite a waterfall engineering type when we execute our projects. And so this agile is quite a new way. And as we're finding more and more people come into the squads to work on, and they're across, again, different silos, you see them being broken down in that space as well. So part of this, we use the IBM Garage, and what's really effective about that is the what we call the use of impediments and constraints. And that really starts to get in through the silos of saying, I can't do this because of, and then how do we enable that as well? So again, it's really allowing it to go at the speed of a startup. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really the trick, right? Is doing everything at digital native speeds.
Yes.
And for an old traditional company in a traditional industry, I mean, that's got to be so tough. You've really sped things up in other ways, right? In terms of HR, I read a story that when you first started, your first day there, I mean, it took you a couple of days to get the things you needed to get going, and you guys have eliminated that by using I guess, tools like Watson and other tools, right? Or just automation?
Yeah, and that's again across the different silos. So what you see is say it's my first day, I come on and it's quite seamless, and there's all these systems and integration underneath and bringing them all together. But as the end user, I don't see that. It's nice and seamless for me. And also for the hiring manager as well. And traditionally what you'd have is all different systems. Your security checks would go off in one place and you wouldn't know has that been finalized or not. But now it all happens and it's very streamlined. So again, reimagining the business process, not being limited by the systems that are currently there, but you take it above a level and just to be able to really streamline. And to the end user, you don't know those silos. It's seamless in moving across.
Yeah.
To what extent are you looking at the cost benefits to any project that you are about to get on? You talk about problems that are going to be solved, but there are also some of the considerations around cost and cost takeout and some other opportunities to be able to reduce inefficiencies. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that again comes back to what's the opportunity that you're trying to solve here, and often it could be a cost focus, it could be a risk reduction as well, a license to operate because we're quite a regulated industry as well. So they're the sort of things that you're looking at when you're assessing the business case of be it the prioritization and going forward, but definitely how do you increase productivity? And you can do a lot of that through automation through to autonomous. And that's really where we're building out to that Northern Star. So at the moment, we have access to data and we're getting the insights. And from the insights, you generate actions. Then you start to look at the automation of it, building out towards autonomous.
Is it a giant hurdle just to clean the data and get it ready for this whole cycle? I hear enterprises complaining about this all the time. The big hurdle is getting the data even usable, by these cycles. But I imagine you're getting pretty clean data from just the IoT devices, but you're a huge company.
If there's one thing, Gina, that if anyone asked for a piece of advice, it would be to get your data in order, and because data is your asset. And we have spent time in, and it was a very early learning on when we started in this area in 2014, was the curation of the data and what it took. So how do you get your data right? And when we talk about the data, that is our data across the entire enterprise, because if that's where you want to be playing, it's got to be right. And so we went back through and rewrote the way that we looked after data, gave clear roles and responsibilities to the people in the enterprise for data, because coming back into AI again is reliant on good data. If you have data that's biased, you're going to have biased to AI, and that's not a space you want to be in. So for us, a key focus has been on the data and making sure it's scalable. That has been absolutely key, because you can do a lot of curating and in like a sandbox sort of play area, but it's when you want to scale and it's enabling that. So part of it is your data, but also your architecture and how do you enable that as well. And that's where we've had a lot of focus and we're really starting to move forward in the scaling now, which is quite exciting.
How long did that take you, going from a non-data curated place to, actually cleaning it up? I mean, it's got to be a big process, right? You got to get a lot of people involved. And
we bring in the data as and when it's required. So as we're going into the different systems, depending on what we're working, rather than, hey, we've got to bring everything in. It's like, okay, we're into this area at the moment. Let's bring that data in, and not in little bits and bobs. We do it a big, a lift and shift.
Yeah, and thematically. Yeah. I mean, what were you going to say?
How far are you from this Northern Star? I'm sure that being an autonomous enterprise is quite difficult to undertake, right? But what's the process like?
Yeah, you're still on this trajectory, right? I mean,
correct.
Yeah.
So we're moving in that direction. So to us, always having that Northern Star, and how do you work your way towards it? And when you're building the blocks, making sure that you're hitting into the Northern Star is really important. So we've got a clear 3-year program ahead of us in building out towards that.
So you have one piece of advice for anybody getting started, getting your data in order. I mean, just given all your experience in this regard with Woodside, What other best practices would you have for any number of our enterprise audience watching?
So part of with your data, it must be accessible and of known quality. That's really key. So again, in the integrity of data, but accessible to your people, not just to the techies, but allowing the people to be able to, and part of this is my next piece of advice, is allowing the people to start to build their own capability. And that's about the reskilling, upskilling of our people and giving them the tools to be able to do that. And you could call it democratization, or we call, like, we've got the citizen data science platform. And what we do is we bring people in, they come in and they learn the tools to be able to work with and how they can extract the data out, design their own algorithms, or sometimes we'll give them pre-formatted algorithms as well. So in that space, but it's really about tooling your organization up as well. And so when we look at this, you might have, a mechanical engineer, chemical engineer, civil engineer. How do you start to give them an AI engineer component as well, and starting to skill them up into that? Some might want to go into hardcore coding. Others just might want to do, the drag and drop, but building out the algorithm in that space as well, and plumbing up to the data. So then you start to run things, again, accessible but of known quality. So you understand the data that you're bringing in and that it is suitable for the problem you're trying to solve. And when I talk about the problem you're trying to solve, something might be of critical nature, so you need the data quality to be right on the money there as well. So and we have the tools that do that as well. So again, informing our people of the quality of the data, so they are well informed in what it is that they're building out there as well. So just recapping back, it's really about data and looking after your data as an asset, and then skilling your people up. And so we have initiatives there where we've got the Digital Academy, and helping our people in that space to skill up. So you can go in and do, it might be you're learning Agile, you're coming into start in what we call the Woodside Accelerator. So people can get an introduction to that. So you might want to understand more about the network, the comms and so forth. So really the Digital Academy, cyber is another big one. So secure by design, but understanding that. We have all these offerings through the Digital Academy as well, which could be online learnings, there could be boot camps, lunch and learns, showcases. So lots of different avenues that are all covered within the Digital Academy as well.
So really,
is there a baseline
of? Go ahead, Michael.
Is there a baseline of skills that you're looking to? Because I think one of the future shows, especially for this program, would be to look at how do we skill up our people. But what is the baseline for creating this citizen data scientists?
So for us, it's really looking at to enable anyone that wants to. So it's even like a citizen app developer as well. So how do you help people to actually develop apps that maybe not where you've got to do the coding, but you might want to automate something that is like, and we've got people of different skill sets that come in and we can skill them up. So what we're looking at across the entire organization is a base digital competency, and be that, so lifting the existing organization, but also as you bring on new recruits and graduates as well, and I probably will have, but making sure they've got that base digital competency, but then also if they want to continue to grow that. So we work in our competency, you have an awareness level, then you moved up into a knowledge level, then into a skilled level, up into a mastery level. And what we want across the organisation though is just at least an awareness level, but people will opt in as to if they want to go further up into that stack as well.
So they know what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And I guess you're arming them with low-code development tools.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. Any tools specifically that they're using, or are you just using a whole raft of low-code tools?
We've got a whole raft of tools that are available. Some have been in-house developed that really, based on, and they're quite bespoke to what it is that they're working in that area as well. It could be in the engineering world, but it brings together all these different systems for them, and it's actually populating, hey, you're looking at this is what you maybe should look at. So almost like a recommender in that space. So again, just helping them, what we were trying to do is bring the information to the people's fingertips to help them in their job as well.
Any last pieces of advice, hard lessons you've learned that you can save other people from having to learn?
I think leaning in is really important, and stepping in and trying. And it doesn't have to be the big monolithic at scale. You can do proof of concepts, which that's what we do. It's I guess the motto that we operate by, and trying something, because in that you always learn. Even if it is not successful, you will learn, and that's really important. And you keep building on that capability.
I guess as you get more efficient with your processes, right, being able to closely monitor these plants and drills, that kind of efficiency eventually gets transferred to the whole market. Right?
Absolutely, and the whole market is shifting as well. You know, in the competition of the world, to remain competitive, costs have got to come down, and I guess that's a focus for us as well. So there's that part, but also where we focus on is in the energy transition, and there's technology in that space there as well. So working in that.
Shelley, thank you so much for joining us today. This is we've never really drilled into the energy industry or AI to this level. We've talked about data ops in general, but not this.
But this won't be the last time.
Yeah,
Excellent.
We will bring you back, Shelley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much, Gina and Michael. It was lovely to chat.
It was great to have you. And to everyone else out there, thanks for joining us for episode 8 of DevOps Breakfast. If you come to Michael's and my LinkedIn pages, I will give you a complimentary access ticket to your Futurescape predictions, right? Your 2021 predictions, Michael? Tomorrow, Tuesday?
Yeah, and the series of Future of X briefings we are undertaking at IDC.
Yeah, and on Thursday, December 3rd, I'm doing one on the future of digital innovation with Linus and I here in Asia. And so that's all she wrote for this episode. Thanks again, Michael. We'll see you soon. And thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you soon.